Okay. All right, we are ready. Hey there, and welcome to Marriage Talks, a real, authentic, and relatable podcast about how to thrive in your marriage. I'm Elizabeth Ann.
And I'm Michael.
Today we have a very special episode for you. We are getting very real. We're getting very real today because we are going to be talking about how to care for your spouse when they have anxiety. That is very real in our marriage, and it's going to be, I think it's going to be a really good episode with a lot of meat, and we're sharing a lot of things today.
Yeah, and this is something that through my experience talking to friends and family and whatnot, something a lot of people deal with. There's a lot of talk about mental health, anxiety being probably the number one problem that a lot of people deal with in our modern world. So it's a very appropriate topic for the evening. So before we get into our topic tonight, we want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by the Marriage Talks Patreon page. It's where we house a lot of our exclusive content, and if you choose to support us through that, you'll get access to that exclusive content and help support us in our mission to help married couples thrive. So check it out. Links will be in the show notes down below.
Yes. Before we get into how to actually care for your spouse, I think it's appropriate for me to share, because I'm the one who really deals with the anxiety, to share my story about what actually happened and why I deal with anxiety.
And a key thing is, if you might want to get a tissue. I'm not even kidding, but this is going to be kind of a moving story. So
when I was 15, we were actually living here in Florida. My sister and I would play outside all the time, and I lived down the street from my best friend, and we would it was normal. Play outside, do active things, we lived in the time when your parents said, go outside and play, and then we'll call you in for dinner. That's really what happened for us. And so we would play outside all the time. And one afternoon, the people who lived across the street from us, it was an older couple, but their sons were moving into the house with them. And so they were moving furniture in and things like that. And my best friend and I were playing volleyball out in the street, because it was not a busy street. It was a cul-de-sac. So, not a lot of traffic. And the volleyball rolled up into our neighbor's driveway. And this guy who was moving in, grabbed the volleyball and started saying things about volleyball and volleyball terms. And, it's just kind of I don't really know you. Can I just have my ball back, basically? And the conversation was basically short. There wasn't really much else to it. But what happened after that was the traumatic part. My dad is very cautious of registered sex offenders, and he found that this guy who was speaking to me is on that list. And so what happened was I had to go testify against him in court as a 15-year-old. It's very weird and very there's not really words for it, to look in your closet and find clothes that are appropriate for court and also don't accentuate anything, is basically the goal. And having picked out an outfit, which I was not prepared for, because it's not something that you really want to try and prepare your 15-year-old or a daughter of any age. Let's make sure we have some clothes in your closet for just in case you have to testify in court. And I get to the court house and walk in the back door, kind of the back where everybody else sits. You're looking at the witness stand and the judge's seat. And I wait to be called. I honestly don't remember if there was a case before ours, because I'm terrified. And I walk up and I sit in my seat, and they don't start anything. I'm just sitting there. I don't know what to do. I'm sitting there. And I'm sitting in the witness stand, and to my left is the judge. Right in front of me is this guy. And then to my right, out of a side door in the courtroom, comes in some men who are shackled, hands and feet, all together, orange jumpsuits. As a 15-year-old sitting there and watching these men look at me the way that they did was something that I don't wish on anyone, because I didn't feel human. And my life didn't feel valued. And it was disgusting. And I had to sit in that seat for what felt like eternity. And then the case actually started. And the judge was asking me questions. Well, not the judge, the attorney was asking me questions. I couldn't form a word. And the attorney asked me, "Is that a yes or a no?" Because I was so outside of any normal experience that anyone should really have to go through. And I didn't know how to form a word. I couldn't say yes, I couldn't say no. It was all And I identified the guy. They asked me, "Is this the guy who talked to you?" And eventually it came to a yes, because I was like, And the attorney was like, is that a yes or a no? Because you have to be clear. And identified the guy, and he asked me a couple of other questions, and it was very clear that this man had done something wrong. And come to find out that he's not allowed to have any contact with any minors whatsoever. And because he spoke to me, he violated his, I'm not sure what the right word is. I don't know if it's parole or I don't know, but he violated the rules that were for him. And so he was furious and stood up, started yelling at me, started yelling at the judge, pointing his finger, and was very upset by the whole thing. He was then sentenced by having to stay 100 yards away from me. And I don't know what length of time that was. I don't know if it was a year, 10 years. I don't know. That was not information that my parents really wanted to worry me about. But what I do know is that it didn't take effect until 24 hours after that. And so my best friend's mom took me and my best friend, and we got out of town just to be safe. And one of the disturbing things that we found out later was that he had hundreds of pictures of me and my sister, because we would play outside like almost every day. And it sickens me to think that happened. and why I'm so cautious with my own kids. I would love to say that that was the only instance that I went through that provided me with anxiety, with specifically men, but it's not. And in high school, I was sexually assaulted, and it was, thankfully, it was extremely quick. But when you're violated like that, if it's short or long, it's still being violated. And it was thankfully promptly dealt with. And my view on men is, first and foremost, distrust. And it's something that I will probably have for the rest of my life. But thankfully, the Lord gave me an amazing partner who loves me and that I trust and that is extremely gracious. And so I'm going to stop crying.
And I've heard the story before, obviously, but I've never honestly heard it in that much detail before after 13 years of knowing you. It's a lot to take in. Yeah.
So that is my story, and really the traumatic events that happened that lead me to anxiety around men. And we really wanted to talk about this because other couples may not have this specific stream of anxiety, but it is very common for people to deal with anxiety. And then when you're in a marriage, how do you navigate that? And that's been such a learning experience for both of us. And Michael, how to hear why I'm experiencing anxiety in certain situations, and then me being able to find the words to talk about it, because what I was sharing with Michael earlier as we were prepping for this episode was people don't like to talk about their anxiety because they're having to relive it. And who wants to relive a traumatic event? It's not like, hey, sign me up, let me go through trauma again. That's not what we want. We want to move on from it. A lot of us want to pretend that it didn't happen.
I think that's a big reason why you hear about some of these big profile, high profile things with Weinstein or whoever. A lot of people say, why'd you wait 15 years to mention it? And then that being kind of like a, did it really happen kind of thing. But if you talk to any PTSD expert, they're going to tell you that you want to basically shove that down inside sometimes. And it's horrible to talk about it and relive it. So
yeah, it's not fun to recount these stories, but my prayer is that by sharing this, it lets other people know who deal with anxiety, especially being in a marriage. But even if you're not, you're not weird for having anxiety. You're not an outcast for having anxiety. It's not like you did something wrong to have anxiety. You didn't do anything wrong. You're not weird. You're not an outcast. It is the sinful world that we live in. I hate that people have to go through something traumatic and then the end result is anxiety or fear or having PTSD about certain situations. And so just our prayer for sharing this is that you feel comforted and you feel like you're not alone, and that we can help in any way we can to provide some tools to help strengthen your marriage, especially if one of you deals with anxiety.
Yeah, this has been a big learning curve for me. I've never dealt with anxiety. I've been just generally, I would consider myself more of a, I would say I'm flexible, but it's way more than flexible versus inflexible. But it's just, bottom line is I've not really dealt with anxiety ever. Being married to Elizabeth, it's been, it's not like you don't have crippling anxiety in like everyday situations, but like there are times when it comes up, there's like a threat kind of thing happening, and it really is like an overload of the fight or flight. And again, kind of going back to a scientific, like mental health aspect of it, it really is like a version, and I'm probably going to butcher this. So if you are a actual therapist, please don't, or do message me. Like I'd like to learn.
Be
but
kind.
yeah,
He's trying.
I'm paraphrasing here, probably real science, but um, the anxiety mechanism is basically like it's the fight or flight. It's the same thing, the sympathetic nervous system. And one of the big things, kind of our number one thing, is to understand your spouse's past.
Yeah.
So we just kind of went over the background so that this all makes a little more sense. And also it's good to kind of get that stuff out there.
Yeah.
Just kind of like air out the laundry, you know?
Yeah, it's not fun to talk about it, but when you release it instead of keeping it pent up, it feels good to let it out. Like, I'm gonna sleep real good tonight.
Yeah,
having let it out. You know, I don't tell this story a whole lot because I don't like to. But understanding a traumatic event or like a series of events that have led to anxiety is super, super important, not only for your spouse, but for yourself. Like for me to really understand what happened and to talk about it and to work through it. Because even the other day, you know, Michael brought up like, because we were talking about doing this episode, and he was like, do you think that might contribute to if we go through seasons, which we have, seasons where we're not as intimately close? And I said, you know, I haven't actually thought about that. Like, I haven't said, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But having him ask that question, that is something that we, and specifically me, I'm considering finding a therapist to go talk to about that.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, it's like something that's that important and traumatic that happened. It's just one of those things we never talked about, or we never brought up that point before like 2-3 weeks ago. And it was like, affect you in more ways than you're really realizing. Just kind of knowing what I know, it's like, that deserves some unpacking for sure. And we're probably going to be, well, we've talked about pursuing that as like kind of a therapy kind of thing. That's a core thing, something that important happening to you. That's got to be deep down there somewhere, kind of showing its face. Because, you know, what Elizabeth was saying is her trust of men was compromised. Like all men was compromised during that event. So that's a huge deal. And I would say that doesn't particularly come up in our day to day, as in like towards me. I don't feel like I'm mistrusted.
No.
Honestly, when this incident comes up, it's kind of rare. We've talked about it in the beginning and stuff as I was kind of getting to know you better in a deep level, but it's worth unpacking, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like just a little side note, if you deal with anxiety, like, and you haven't gone to see a therapist about it, and I'm saying this to basically keep myself accountable, like go see a therapist about it, because they're there to help. They're not there to shame. And it will lead to good things. And so that in the future, that will be something that I'll start going through the process of finding someone who I trust and feel good about talking to about this sort of thing. But would you want to move into the second thing, not only understanding your spouse's past, but also being patient? This is huge.
To be patient is number 2. This is my lesson. I'm talking about this because this is my deal. As someone who's not dealt with anxiety, I witnessed it firsthand, probably in the strongest way. Like, of course, I hear that story that she shared. I understand that has a lot of effect. But in the day-to-day, the anxiety wasn't really like crippling until it was one day. And just a real quick recap of that day, it was probably late 2017 or early 2018 or something like that. We just had 2 kids at that time. Our third wasn't born yet. We went to Mall of Millennia, which is a big, high, like huge, upper scale really nice mall in Orlando. And there was a lot of people there. It must have been a Saturday, I would imagine.
I think it was a Saturday.
Kind of like out of the blue to me, as an observer, out of the blue, she's like, we're sitting down to eat Chick-fil-A at the food court. And she's like, we have to go. I was like, what do you mean we have to go? She's like, we have to get out of here. And as a newbie to kind of dealing with anxiety in the flesh and like in person, my first reaction was, no, we just sat down. Like, we don't get to go out very often. It's like, what the heck is going on? I want to sit down and eat my Chick-fil-A. Our kids are fine. Why don't you just like breathe, okay? And it wasn't quite that sharp. But it was just like, what's going on? Like, we're not leaving. That's kind of overboard. And then just like one look at her eyes was like, whoa, okay. All right, kids, let's kind of get all this stuff going. And it was like I said, fight or flight. You could see it. She was like terrified. After talking about this tonight, I mean, of course, like I said, this is 2 years ago. Our other son was not born yet. But in planning for this episode, I found out that there was a trigger that I was totally unaware of. And again, I was like...
Well, I think I was unaware of it too.
Okay. But it was like one of those things where like, wait, there's a trigger to this more than just like claustrophobia or people. I guess I'll let you share that. I don't want to steal that story.
Yeah, so Michael took our daughter down the escalator because she wanted to go down the escalator and ride it. And then we had a stroller, so I had to go down the elevator, and I was like, oh, it'll be fine. Like, I was like, it'll be fine. And the food court was on the second level, so Michael went up the escalator, and then I went up the elevator with the stroller and our son. And as I'm coming out of the elevator, 4 men who are much taller than I am, and if you don't know how tall I am, I'm 5'5". I'm basically average, but really every other guy is bigger than me. But they were much taller than me. And because of my experiences, I make a very quick judgment about all men. Like, how are you carrying yourself? What's your demeanor? Like, what's your kind of emotion that you're showing right at that moment? And how you're dressed. And it may be unfair, but considering the things that I've gone through, like, for my protection, I feel like I have to make a quick judgment to make myself understand whether or not I feel safe. I felt all blood go from my head. And if you've ever felt close to passing out, you'll understand this, where you feel like your vision is cloudy. If you remember those old, 90s sitcoms where they would do like a dream sequence, and like the outsides of the perimeter of the show would be like cloudy and white. That's what my vision was like. And I basically like put my head down and got away as quick as I could. That was apparently my trigger. I didn't realize that until it happened. And I would say, a side note, that is also something really important if you deal with anxiety, is to identify your triggers. Because if you ignore those, your anxiety will keep popping up and you won't be able to help work through it or to prevent it, or to understand like really why certain situations cause a lot of pain. And so that was like the trigger. And then I felt like I was losing control. I felt like there's so many people in here and I don't know where to go. I don't know who's good, who's bad. I felt like I was spinning, and I don't like to feel out of control. I'm a type A, like, OCD person where like I want things to be clean and in order and have a schedule and rely on that, and that took all of that away from me. And so that's why that basically, call it a stress attack, call it an anxiety attack. I don't know what the right label is for it, but it happened. And from that moment on, I am very, very cautious about the situations and environments that I not only put myself in, but I put like our entire family in. if I feel like the scenario is going to be very crowded, I won't do it. I can't do it. And that's been an ongoing conversation for us.
Yeah. All right. So that is definitely the last story that I'm going to make you live through. And as I was listening to that, I was like, crap, okay. We're going to call it with that one as far as stories go. But it was very enlightening to me to see it in action for the first time. And we're talking like we've been together for like 7. We've been married for like 7 years, together for like
at that point
9 at that point. Yeah. So it was a long time. Like I said, it doesn't come up every day, but when it comes up hard. And it's like, as the spouse, as the partner, you got to be on your game. Like, look for the signs, and then know when it's that time. It's not about trying to solve it necessarily. Like, just be there and get your person out of there in whatever way they need to. They might not be able to think real straight, so you kind of got to be on top of things. But it was tough as the first time, and of course, I wish I could go back and do a little better job than I did.
Yeah,
but I'll do it again next time.
Yeah, you didn't know. You were just working with me throwing emotions on you, and you did as good a job. I mean, if you would have said like, "You're fine, sit down," then I would have been like, "Excuse me, I'm taking my kids and we're getting out of here." But you didn't do that. You did really as good as anybody could have expected, having like basically being thrown a curveball, and not really having any prior experience with it. So it's, you did a good job. And I would say, if you're, as a little side note, if your spouse is letting you know, like, I'm not comfortable in this situation, the last thing you should do, never ever do it, is to like minimize their feelings and to say you're fine. Don't ever do that. I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to be real and authentic. You're wrong. Don't ever minimize your spouse's feelings.
Yeah, because it's not something they choose. After seeing that, and after seeing a friend go through an anxiety attack at a soccer game, it's like, you know that person, they wouldn't choose to be like spinning out of control. It is absolutely a deep, deep body brain thing, and you gotta be on it for that person and be able to help them, instead of saying, no man, these people, crowding you really aren't threats. Like, they feel like they are, and they can't just snap themselves out of it. It's not that easy.
Yeah. No, it's not like you just do a 360 turn and 10 jumping jacks and you feel good. Like, it's not that simple. But that is where like recognizing the triggers come in, is that you learn those triggers, and then when you go see a therapist can help give you tools to deal with those things. I don't know that from experience because, as I said earlier, I haven't seen a therapist about this. However, I know people who have gone to a therapist with anxiety, and they have given them tools to deal with their anxiety in the moment. And so I know that there's tools out there. I can't tell you what they are. I'm not going to pretend like I know, because I'm not a therapist. And if you really struggle with anxiety, please go see one, because like I said earlier, they are there to help you. And this is a big thing. Like, having anxiety is not something that anyone should shoulder on their own. Thankfully, I've had Michael to talk to, but if I didn't have someone to talk to, like, I would go see someone ASAP. So yeah, never minimize your spouse's feelings, because that's going to do a ton of harm. And let me tell you, you're going to be in counseling for that.
Oh yeah.
Don't do it at all.
All right, so let's move on to our next little point. This one's all you.
Yeah, so read up and study about anxiety, and learning more about it, learning just more about how it affects, your brain, your body, like everything, because the more you can understand and get yourself in a similar headspace as your spouse who deals with anxiety, it's going to help you understand them and why they are reacting a certain way, why they're processing a certain way. And it's just good to educate yourself on that. And that's something that you can do together, because, I think a lot of times when you have anxiety, you kind of feel shameful about it, and you don't feel like anybody else understands. And so reading up about it is kind of the last thing you want to do. So I think sitting down together and reading up about anxiety, and educating yourselves about it is really going to be helpful, because it gives you something that you're doing together. It brings you closer together. It unites the two of you, and that you can help work through it together.
Yeah, and that goes for both the person going through the anxiety. Like, you need to know what's happening inside your brain, inside your body, the reactions, the adrenaline, what it does, and that will help you understand and maybe take a little bit of the reins when things start getting out of control. But also, I'm speaking at it from the other person's side of, I need to know, hey, what can I do besides just saying, I hear you, I see you, but like, what else can I do? What else can I learn about this thing? And another thing that I just thought of while Elizabeth was talking was, as coming from, I've talked to some people they suffer from anxiety who are also believers, are Christians. It can be an especially tough thing for a Christian. Specifically, we know that God's in control of everything. Every single molecule on earth is under his command. So where does anxiety fit into that? It's a really difficult thing to grasp because if you believe that the Lord has everything planned out and under control, then why does my body keep telling me that I'm freaking out, like everything is out of control? And a lot of people will just tell you, if they've never really been with somebody who has anxiety, hey man, just pray about it. But there is power in prayer. Don't hear me wrong.
Yeah.
But in the moment of something like that, just pray it out, man. It can kind of work against you. That's not what that person necessarily needs to hear right then. Kind of go back to some of the other stuff. Remove the threat. Remove the person from the offending situation or something. That's the best thing you can do in the moment. And you absolutely need to be in the Word. Need to be in prayer about the condition. I promise you, that's important.
Yeah.
But I think other people, I'm just talking about from other people. I've talked to people with anxiety and they're like, oh, I just, when somebody tells me that's all I need to do. Therefore, that means I'm not praying hard enough. I'm not in the Word enough. It's I'm praying, I'm in the Word, but I haven't been delivered from this thing yet. So it can be a little detrimental to the person in the middle of anxiety to be told in a way you're not doing it right. So just be aware of that. I'm just bringing that up because that's been said to me. I wasn't luckily the receiving person of that criticism, but I'm now aware of this. If you have somebody in that situation, it's got to be pretty delicate.
The next thing that would be super, super helpful and has actually really helped us is taking it day by day. And within that, you'll find yourself in situations where hey, we're supposed to be doing this activity or going here. Is that something you're comfortable with? So, Michael knows, and I know that when we go and do things, especially in big public areas, we have to take that situation by situation. It's not like a blanket statement, they're all good or they're all bad. But I think approaching those things and hearing the person who deals with the anxiety out, whatever that anxiety is, just hearing their heart about it. I do think that there is appropriate encouragement.
Yeah, that's a big
for
thing.
sure. I never want to become crippled by my anxiety. And there's definitely days where I'm I'm never leaving the house. We're never going to go anywhere. And I feed into that. And that's not healthy. But then there are days where Michael's I really think that we should do this. I think it would be good for us. I think it would be, I hear your hesitations. And I know the things to look out for because we've talked about it.
Yeah.
If you don't talk about it with your spouse, they can't understand the things that they need to look out for in whatever situation your anxiety might come up.
Well, especially as the parents of young kids, their experiences we want them to have. And if the anxiety got to a crippling level, then we're not going to any retail, movie theaters, parks, theme parks, nothing. And it starts to get to the point where it can be kind of detrimental to a lot of other things. So that's another thing is as the spouse of someone who goes through anxiety, you have to be ready to see it, ready to act and help, but at the same time encourage during the safe times look, we can control certain things so that we can go to the park, make sure it's daytime, make sure it's a good park, and just watch out for certain signs. But look, we need to go do stuff. We need to be out. The kids need to run around. It's okay to be around water, other people, you name it, whatever the source of the anxiety is. But as the partner, the non-anxiety person is too, you just got to be sensitive and not just be bulldozing and causing, you'll know if you cause worse problems, it'll come out. You can't avoid it.
Yeah.
So just be careful.
Yeah, definitely don't bulldoze. Don't just say, you'll be fine. We'll go out or we'll go into a situation where your anxiety is heightened. Don't do that because the person who deals with anxiety is going to shut it down. If you've been listening for a while, that phrase comes up a bit. But
Yeah. It's not like a calling card at this point. Let's just own it.
But yeah, so if you really Michael's right. Like, we do need to experience things. We do need to go out. And is my anxiety level higher when we go do those things? Absolutely. 100%. I am scanning every person in the room.
Yeah, if you've ever been to like a zoo and you've seen meerkats or like prairie dogs where they're like, it's kind of not really like the head thing, but
yeah, I'm looking at
seeing
everyone, like a Secret Service agent. I'm looking at everyone, but I know that I know and trust that Michael is looking out for other people too. Like he's not like 100% trusting other people. Like he is making sure that our children are protected. He is protecting our family unit. Like I have trust in that. And so, we, is his anxiety level as high as mine? Absolutely not. But he knows that in order to make me feel comfortable out and about, he has to be much more watchful and on his game than he probably would by himself. Or if he was married to somebody who didn't have anxiety, like if I didn't have anxiety, so he just ups his game because he knows that I need it, is what I'm trying to say. So taking it day by day, taking those situation by situation is very important. Like, don't lay a blanket statement over everything because it's not helpful for you. If you're dealing with anxiety, it's not helpful for your spouse. Just take it day by day because things can change.
Yeah, and our final point is to find coping mechanisms or the fly just landed on me. Our final point is to find coping mechanisms or ways to avoid anxiety attacks, ways to reduce them when they are coming on, and various things like that. So, therapy, number one. It's the number one. You can avoid busy parks, busy malls, and stuff like that. Start doing some smaller things. The big thing is just talking stuff out. Coping mechanisms.
Yes.
Communicate the need, what needs to change, what are the triggers, stuff like that. We've had a pretty good time with doing that. I feel like I understand her anxiety a lot better than I did 8, 9, 10 years ago, for sure. And honestly, a lot of this understanding has come in like 4 years. Like the last 4 years, I've understood it a lot more after not just witnessing her stuff, but also having some friends who have been willing to share experiences and stuff like that has been really helpful for me. And what other coping mechanisms are really?
I think just the biggest thing is communication. You might, once you go through therapy, and I'm sure it will be true for us, once I go through therapy with it, it'll be like I have some coping mechanisms like in the height of an anxiety attack that a therapist will give me that I can then communicate to him. And then if, like, say we're in a situation where I can't remember them, he can be like, X, Y, and Z, whatever it is, to help remind me and like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And just being honest about that stuff, being open and honest and keeping the communication going. Like, today was a really hard day for my anxiety. Today was a good day for my anxiety. And then in unpacking why it was bad and why it was good. Because I think that those are not only good things to communicate to your spouse so that they can help understand you and your anxiety better, but also it would help me. Like, it helps me when I say, today was a better day for my anxiety. Today was a bad day for my anxiety. And here's why it was that way. Because then I can unpack those things and help work through them. And so just being open with that communication. And it feels really scary. I was scared as all get out to share those things with you because they're not fun.
Yeah, and the big thing to understand with all this stuff is that because you suffer from anxiety, you're not weak-minded. You're not a coward. None of that stuff's true. That is lies. Get that crap out of here. It's a real thing. It's really important to understand. It's really important to understand when it's you. It's really important to understand when it's your partner. So don't believe the lies about all that junk. That is just false.
With all of the things said today, we do want to bring you a challenge. And if this is your first time listening, we always challenge you as the listener, something that you can apply, you can take from this episode and apply to your marriage. And in the next 7 days, we want you to check in with your spouse and talk to them about any anxiety that they have. Maybe they have told you about some anxieties and you just need to check in with them, because this is a regular thing. Michael and I regularly check in with each other.
Yeah, it's not a one conversation kind of deal.
No, not at all. So checking in with your spouse, and maybe the topic of anxiety has never come up. Well, talk to them about it, because maybe there isn't. That's great. Maybe there is. You've got some talking to do. Unpacking that, don't force them. Or maybe it's you. Maybe you're listening to this and you're like, I have anxieties that I haven't shared with my spouse. Absolutely don't feel like you're pressured, like you have to do it now. However, when you do, it will bring you closer together. Much, much stronger. And it's just so important to be honest and open with your spouse about everything, anxieties included.
It's one of those things, this stuff is so much worse when you go through it by yourself. And especially if you're married, you've got somebody there who can, hopefully bring you to a better place and just like help you hash through it and just go through it together. But it is absolutely a huge topic and super, super difficult to kind of unpack. But the key is just getting started.
Absolutely.
Just talk about it. Talk about it with your special person. Talk about it with a professional if you need to. And then honestly, be in the Word. Be in prayer, be with your talk to your pastor about it. You may find this one of those things where like you'll be shocked if you're not already aware of how many people deal with this. It is so common. We live in a busy world that just has so many pressures on every single person: work, school, family, you name it. There's a lot, bashing us down. So you're in good company, and there's a lot of people out there who can help. Number one being the one right next to you.
Yeah, and I do want to say this episode is not a substitute for talking to a professional. We are not therapists. We are sharing our experience as a married couple, and to help give you comfort in knowing that it's safe to go talk to someone. So please do that if you deal with anxiety, especially, but just across the board. Talk to a therapist, period, if you deal with anxieties. And we did a whole episode about going to counseling as a married couple. We are pro counseling, therapy, whatever you want to call it. We are pro that. Go do it. But specifically, if you deal with any anxiety, please go do it, because we are not a substitute for a professional counselor or therapist.
Yeah, and so that wraps it up. We appreciate you guys sticking around for a double episode. We usually try to shoot for 30 minutes, and I kind of gave her the signal with we're going long on this one. This is a lot. Was heavy. Yeah. So, anyways, you guys can catch us at all the normal places: Facebook group, Instagram. We have our email at marriagetalkspodcast@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you guys. If you have any feedback on this episode or want to share any stories that you're comfortable with, please do. We want to be a community for you guys. So we love y'all, and we look forward to talking with you next week.
Bye, guys.